So I'm also working with you guys. So this is what I developed with these two lectures. It perfectly works. Let me stop mine and run it again. Starting, ready.
I want to add a min, so minimum.
Yeah, it's working. So try on these lectures. I'll be with the next. So if there's any problem, any issue, just drop a comment.
Characters through. Okay, so right now we're getting our products directly from this db sampledata.ts file, which obviously we don't want to do. We want to get them from our database. Now we don't have any functionality to add products yet. So to get stuff in our database, we're just going to create a simple seeder, which is just a script that will add products to the database. And what we're going to add is everything that's in this sample data file. So we're going to use this again to populate our database. And then instead of fetching these products directly from the file, we'll then fetch them from the database. And then we can move on to add our functionality to create products and update, edit, and all that, purchase products and so on. So let's create this in the DB folder. We're going to create a new file called seed.ts. And then we're going to import from here the Prisma client so we can interact with our database. So that's going to be from @/Prisma, or what is it, @Prisma, sorry, Prisma client. And then let's also bring in the sample data. Then we're going to have an asynchronous function, and it's asynchronous because the Prisma methods that we're going to use to get the products are asynchronous. So I'm just going to call this function main, and then we're going to run it at the bottom here. And then in the main function, we're going to first off initialize or instantiate the Prisma object. So let's say const Prisma, set that to new Prisma client. Then we want to delete all the products, because if we run this, we don't want to just keep adding. If there's already stuff in the database, we don't want to just keep adding to it. We want to wipe everything out and then re-add these 6 products or however many it is. So let's say await, because this is asynchronous, and then Prisma dot and then product, which is the name of the model we're using, and we're going to use the delete many method, and that will just delete everything in the product table. Then we want to create the products. So let's say Prisma, and we're going to use product dot create many, and that will take in an object with data, and the data that we're going to add is going to be the sample data dot products array. Okay, and that's it. And then we'll just do a console log, and we'll just say database seeded successfully. All right, so yeah, we'll go ahead and now we can run this. Since it's a TypeScript file, we're not going to use Node, we're going to use TSX, and we can do that using npx and then TSX, and what is it? It's going to be / and then the DB folder and then seed, and we don't have to put the TS. So let's just run that. Yeah, we need to install TSX, just say yes for that. That just allows us to run TypeScript. Okay, so now database seeded successfully. So now we can check that out in Prisma Studio. I'm going to just go back here and reload this. And if we go to, you know what, we might have to restart. Oh no, they're there. Yep, so there's our 6 products. So notice the ID, they're formatted as the UUID because that's what we specified in the model. We have the name, the slug, which is just a URL-friendly version of the name. The categories, we have the images, which is an array, and the brand, the description, the stock number, price, rating, the number of reviews, the is featured, which is a Boolean, the banner, and created at. All right, so everything looks like it got added correctly. So now we're still fetching the data directly from the file. In the next video, we're going to switch it up and actually fetch it from the database. We want to fetch our data from the database now that we seeded some sample data, because right now we're just pulling the products from the file. Now to do this, we're going to be using server actions. And server actions are essentially just asynchronous functions that are executed on the server. And to create a server action, we just need to add use server at the top, and then we create our asynchronous function. Now these actions you can actually submit a form to, just like you would with like PHP, where you would submit it to a file. So as you can see right here, this is an example. The action is set to update item action. Now you don't have to submit a form. Obviously, if we're fetching data, we're not submitting any forms. So you can just put it in an event, put it in a function that is called on some event, or just, stick it in the component, set latest products equal to get latest products action, or whatever it might be. All right, so really, really simple, and it's, in my opinion, much better than using API routes, which is what we would have done pre-next version 14. So, and API routes still have their place, of course. If you have maybe a React front end and you want to have a front end, you want to have like a mobile app and use the same API, that's where API routes are really useful. But something like this, just a single monolithic application, then in my opinion, you should use server actions. So we're going to create a new folder in lib called actions. And basically what I want to do is have for each resource, like products, users, or orders, it'll have a file dedicated to those actions. So let's create a new file here called product.actions.ts. And we're going to want to import, well, first of all, we need to add use server at the very top. And then since we're dealing with Prisma, we want to import the Prisma client. Now we're going to create a function that fetches our products, or our latest products, and what that returns initially is a Prisma object. And we're going to have to convert that to just a plain JavaScript object. So we will be writing just a very simple utility function to wrap around the value to make it, or to convert it into just a regular JavaScript function. But we'll do that in a few minutes. So let's create the function. I'm going to comment it since we're going to have a bunch of functions here. Let's say get latest products. And we want to export this and call async. And I'm just going to call this get latest products. Okay, and just like we did in the Cedar, we're going to initialize Prisma. So let's set that to new Prisma client. Okay, and then I want to just fetch. We'll say fetch the latest 4 products, which I guess are objects. So we'll say const data, and we want to set that to await, and then Prisma. So Prisma.product, and I'm going to use the find many, or not find first, find many method, and what that's going to take in is an object, and we can specify take, which is how many we want. Now, even though our product, the product list component, remember we made it so it has a limit, and we set it to 4 anyway, so it's only going to show 4 even if we get more than that, but why take more than we're going to show? So we'll say take 4. And then let's add the order by, because we want it to be the latest first, so we'll order it by the created at, and we'll set it to descending. Okay, and then we just want to return the data. Now remember, like I said, this data is a Prisma object, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. I just want to first show you how to actually bring this in and use it, and where we want to do that, obviously, is our home page. So in the app root page.tsx, instead of sample data, we can get rid of that, which is just bringing in the data from the file. Let's bring in the action. So it's going to be get latest products, and then right here above the return, we can simply say const latest, we'll say latest products, set that equal to await get latest products. Now, since we're using await, we have to make this homepage function asynchronous, which we can do since we're using a server component. And then instead of sample data products, let's get rid of that, and let's say latest products. Okay, so now we're fetching it from the database. If I reload, you see it is getting them, but we do have an error. And this has to do with the decimal type because, like I said, we're returning a Prisma object. So what we're going to do is just create a simple utility function. So in utils or libutils, and let's put a comment, and I'm going to say this is going to convert. So convert a Prisma object into a regular JS object. Okay, so we're going to say export function, and I'm going to call this convert. We'll call it convert to plain object. And it's going to take in a value. Now, since we're using TypeScript, I'm just going to add a generic here. So angle brackets with a T, and I'll explain this in a second if you don't know what this is. And then return type will be a T as well. Okay, now in the function, it's just going to be one line. We're simply going to return JSON.parse, and then we want to pass in JSON.stringify, and then pass in the value. So that will just make it just a regular JavaScript object. Now, as far as this rigmarole, this is called a TypeScript generic, and this T, it's basically a placeholder for any type that the function might accept when it's called. So it could be a string, an object, it could be a Prisma model, and this value T is just specifying the type of the parameter or the argument that's passed in. And TypeScript infers the type at the time of the function call. And then this :t, this is for the return of the function, the return type. And it specifies that it should be the same type as the input. All right, so if you call the function with a product object, then TypeScript knows that the return value will also be the type of product. So yeah, we'll save that, and then we're going to just bring that into the action and just wrap this return. Okay, so let's say import, and we're going to bring in convert, and we're going to use this in a few different places. So convert to plain object, and then convert to plain object, and just wrap that data. And now if we save that and reload, we shouldn't see that warning in the console, right? Because we're just getting a regular JavaScript object. It's not a Prisma object where we're getting errors about decimals. All right, so yeah, we're now fetching our latest products. What I would like to do before I end this video, though, is add a constant for the limit. So I'm going to go to, let's see, we want to go to our constants, index.ts, and let's add here, export const, and I'm going to call this latest, so latest underscore products underscore limit. And I'm going to set that to, I want to set that to the .env value if there is one, but I want to cast it as a number, so I'm going to use number, and then I'm going to pass in process.env and then latest underscore products limit, and then we'll just have or for. Okay, and you can put that value in your .env if you want. I'm not going to, I'm just going to leave it here. But then we can use that in, let's go back to the actions, and instead of just hard coding for, we'll use that. So we'll say import, and what did I call it? Latest products limit, and then we're just going to use that here. So latest products limit. And yeah, so we'll save that. Now, like I said, if it's going to be for no matter what, because if we look at the product list component, which is right here, that takes in a limit, and in our card where we use, no, where do we use that? In our home page, we're passing in limit 4 anyway. But if I were to get rid of that, we should still only get 4 because that's what we're getting from the database. If I change that constant to, let's do 6, then I get 6. All right, so it's up to you on how you want to set it up. I'm going to keep that 4, and I'm also going to keep the limit here. But if you want to show more than that, of course, you can set that to something else. All right, so now that we're fetching our data, so we know how to do that. We know how to create an action. I want to start to get more into TypeScript, and we're going to get into validating our data as well. So we're going to use something called Zod for that, and that's what we're going to get into in the next video.